It has been a bittersweet day, very bittersweet, but to focus on the sweet side, it's just been confirmed that finally, after so long, the Black Clover anime will be returning with a new season, with the last episode being released over 4 years ago in March 2021, when I was technically not an adult yet, so it's been a very long time. I was 16. Anyway, since then has been the release of the movie The Sword of the Wizard King that came out over 2 years ago in 2023, and that was a lot of fun. And the manga is also still going strong, well, still going with 380 chapters at this point in time, and it passed 10 years in serialization this past February, which is a huge achievement. So in the light of this great news surrounding the anime's grand return, supposedly, I want to talk about what's going on right now with the manga. And a good place to start to address the current state of the manga is, for a while now the release schedule has slowed down, but that's of course because it's actually no longer published in Weekly Shonen Jump anymore, but instead in Jump Giga now, and has been since chapter 368, with Giga being a quarterly magazine, so it releases every 3 months or so every season, and the chapters have been released in batches of 2 or 3 since it switched magazine, so that means another couple of chapters are on their way very soon with the summer edition of Giga, which will be releasing on the 12th of August, where we will be getting 3 new chapters, so that's 381, 382, 383, along with some special illustrations from a bunch of the biggest mangakas such as tybw, Eiichiro Oda, Kohei Horikoshi, and so on, to commemorate its 10th anniversary. So in a way it's similar to Bleach, where the 1000-Year Blood War anime was announced during its 20th anniversary event, and we're getting Black Clover's anime return announced for its 10th. I'm gonna be using Bleach and the 1000-Year Blood War anime for comparison a few times throughout the rest of the video. Anyway, so while the chapter releases may feel a bit random at the moment, they still do follow a schedule, which is nice, because without this knowledge you might think that the infrequent releases are simply a sign of the author Yuki Tabata's poor health, but that's not to say health and well-being isn't a factor here, because it 100% is. I have no doubts that played a huge role in the decision to switch magazines, and I've talked about this many times before with many series about the incredibly unforgiving work conditions and deadlines mangakas face, especially those releasing on a weekly basis. So regardless of how often we get new material for a story, or how unoften we get new material, I'll understand, because these guys are still people. Tabata is still a person and needs rest. The fact that he's come this far over 10 years is insane. So I will cherish every little thing we do get, because I, at least in small part, am aware of the blood, sweat and tears that goes into this work. It's just a shame that the industry doesn't care at all about my feelings or my sentimentality, because the conveyor belt, the train, will keep chugging along. So even though Black Clover is still around, I do think it's fair to say it has fallen by the wayside a bit, fallen out of the public eye, while Shonen Jump just keeps going. Other manga also keep it pushing, new manga show up, some get cancelled, some become huge hits, and that for a lot of people unfortunately does leave Black Clover as a bit of an afterthought. For example, last year 2 of its biggest contemporaries, My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen, both came to an end, and many would group Black Clover in with those two as the faces of this generation. I say generation a bit loosely, because My Hero and Black Clover began serialization around a good 3 or 4 years before JJK, so it's like, how long is a generation? Is JJK part of the generation after those other two? For simplicity's sake, I'm gonna bunch those 3 together. The biggest series of Shonen Jump, not including One Piece, so the biggest of this modern-ish era. When My Hero and Jujutsu Kaisen ended, there wasn't much noise from where I was sitting surrounding Black Clover. It was just around, what's next? Who is going to take up the mantle now? As if everyone had forgotten that Black Clover was still around. Some people may have been under the impression it was already finished, some still may be under that impression. So you get the middle child of Shonen, the forgotten son, and it works on multiple levels since it was published after My Hero Academia, but before Jujutsu Kaisen as well, and it is long overdue for that to change. It should have never reached this point to begin with, and with the anime returning, that would certainly give it that boost, one that it does deserve, you know, I think. And another thing I want to bring up is that I wasn't around to see this. It was before I really got into anime and manga, but I have seen this situation compared to Bleach, in the sense that I'm anime only with Bleach, and it's for the very same reason actually. It's because I learned that Tite Kubo was not able to end the series on his own terms, and it ended up being a very rushed finish to one of the biggest manga of all time, which is really weird to hear, to think about, because pushing aside the quality of the actual story, surely Bleach was one of Shueisha's biggest moneymakers, so you'd think they would want to keep it around, milk it for every last penny it's worth, not force it closer to the finish line. This is barring any extra information on the subject I don't know about, because obviously I don't have all the details. But yeah, with the 1000-Year Blood War anime, a lot of new material has been added to better flesh out the arc, and I have followed along with, kept up with the changes and additions through the Bleach community so I can get a perspective of how rushed the ending was, how different the anime is to the manga, and how much story Kubo still had to give, you know. Anyway, here with Tabata, again, I have no insight on the behind the scenes, what's going on, the in-depth reasoning on why Black Clover has gone down this path, but it's very safe to say this isn't how he ideally wanted to end things. And back to this anime news, I guess the hope would be for it to do something similar to what the 1000-Year Blood War anime did for Bleach, although it's not the exact same scenario since there were years between the end of Bleach and the return of its anime, whereas here Black Clover is still ongoing. If that has any impact on the anime potential production, I don't know. So I've been kind of trying not to talk down on the series for the situation it has found itself in, because it's not like this was intentional. Circumstances just forced people's hands and that led to this, so be it. But also I don't want to just keep hammering away at the story, you know, forcing all the blame onto it. You know who actually finds joy in talking about the negatives? Well, a lot of people actually. A big chunk of the anime community revels in it. Anyway, I prefer looking and staying on the bright side, but I do acknowledge the negatives because it would be disingenuous if I didn't. So the current release schedule of the manga and the space between chapters, it's so easy to forget what was going on in the story, especially if you are a casual reader. It's so easy to lose interest purely because of how much time passes, and as much as I love and enjoy this story, that does apply a bit for me as well. It kind of leads back to what I was saying before about how I'm not gonna get on the author's back about this. It's not their fault, but it's still an issue. Obviously, I'm only talking about how things look from my point of view. Like, I only ever interact with the English side of the community, so that's another interesting topic. How does the Japanese audience view all of this? Is it similar to the Western view or different? Anyway, it's undeniably harder to hold people's attention when they are no longer getting new content every single week, but one positive I can find in this is that it's the perfect excuse for a rewatch or a reread. So to talk briefly about what this anime return would mean, the last episode 170 adapted chapters 268, 269, 270 and the first few pages of 272, so even at this point there's over 100 chapters of the manga to be adapted, plus however many more are yet to be released until the manga ends. And the anime ended right at the beginning of the Spade Kingdom raid arc 10, so there's still 60 chapters left of that to adapt up to chapter 331, and then after that is the final arc. Then comes the question of how they will decide to adapt it, since everything is seasonal nowadays, or at least almost everything. It was already guaranteed that this revival was also going to be seasonal. Bringing the Bleach comparisons back, the 1000-Year Blood War is split into 4 cores, basically a fancy way of saying 4 seasons, plus they are both animated by the same studio, Piero, so 109 chapters to adapt at this moment in time. Let's say each episode will contain 4 chapters worth of content, maybe a bit more, since with the heavy focus on fight with a lot of the chapters, more can be fit into one episode, so that would equate to around 26 episodes at this point in time. Let's say 30, since some episodes may adapt a fewer number of chapters than others, so let's say 1 season, 1 core, whatever you want to call it, that covers the rest of arc 10 and another for the final arc maybe, although 60 chapters seems like a lot of content for one single season. Then there's the prospect of Tabata having a greater level of input in its production, although if I'm being completely realistic, I doubt he's going to be able to work as closely with the anime staff as Kubo has been able to, because that just seems like a very special case. But that doesn't mean the anime return isn't going to be great without it, because it definitely will. And talking about being realistic with the 1000-Year Blood War, it was announced separately that they will adapt the whole arc in its entirety, and they had that luxury because the manga had ended and it was one arc, a very long arc, but still one. So I think for the time being here, the Black Clover return will at most only only adapt the rest of arc 10 before continuing later with the final arc after the manga ends, and should everything with the anime go well, which I mean, if they do it right, it is going to be just fine. Originally, I was gonna talk a lot more about my thoughts on the story, like how I experienced it, my favorite parts of it, maybe a bit of analysis as well, but I make those kinds of videos when a series ends, like when My Hero ended or Jujutsu Kaisen ended. I made that kind of video, but the key difference here, of course, is that Black Clover is still here. Let me repeat and let me make clear, Black Clover is not over just yet. Regardless of the current output or whatever it's still pushing, it has still got a bit more to give, and I mentioned the boost that an anime return could give it. How cool would it be for Black Clover to be back in the fold, back in discussions again on a regular basis? With that being said, although it hasn't ended yet, it is still ending soon. We are almost 40 chapters into this final arc, and the idea of the final chapter from this point on is only going to become more real, which is the same for any story. As soon as the first chapter is released, each subsequent chapter is one step closer to the end. So I will make sure to savor every last bit of Black Clover while it is still here.